Make it hot. There we go. Yeah, hot. All right. Wow, thank you. I'm so happy that you guys are here to bear witness to my losing my TEDx virginity. I thought it was quite appropriate and ironic that I'm doing so here in a chapel, but that's a whole nother story. So, March 2009. I sat bedside with my stepfather, who was very much a father to me, raised me since I was 10. Unfortunately, he was in his final days of life, and the illness that had consumed his body for years was really finally winning the war. And as I sat next to him, I held his hand. And while he couldn't communicate verbally anymore, I do believe that we were able to connect through that point of physical touch, because I had a vision of my funeral. Not of his, but actually of mine. And I could hear the words being spoken graveside, which were, "Here lies Steve Olsher. He dedicated his life to chasing the almighty dollar." And that's all that was said. And it hit me really hard, because I do believe that he was showing me my inevitable fate unless I changed course. And it was as if my life kind of flashed before my eyes, and I realized that from a very young age, I've always felt insignificant. I think first it started when I would get the beatings from my brother, who was 6 years my senior, and I was literally like a toddler at that point, and continued when my father left when I was 7, and he was really the last line of defense between me and my brother. And there are some people here who know me as an author and a speaker and an entrepreneur. But, the God's honest truth is, as I stand here today, I really feel like a fraud. And it's not because I'm a failure. And by the way, I don't think there is any such thing as failure. Failure to me is basically just success with an unintended ending. So it's not as though I'm a failure, but it's just that I feel as though my contributions are insignificant. And it turns out I'm not the only one who feels that way. Consider the movie Schindler's List. Spielberg's, amazing portrayal of the atrocities of the Holocaust. And the film centers on Oskar Schindler, a Czech businessman who moves from, obviously Czechoslovakia to Krakow, Poland, to basically exploit the slave labor that was available because of the Jews in the concentration camps. And so he bribes his way to get basically the blessing of the German military to open up a factory. Over time, he witnesses just the ugly, loathsome massacre of the innocent. And he shifts from being this capitalist to being a humanitarian. And he does everything he can to save as many Jews as possible. And in that time period, he saved over 1,100 Jews. And he spent his entire fortune to do so. But yet in the climactic scene, when the Soviet Red Army is approaching at the end of the war, and he knows he's going to be arrested for being a Nazi and a profiteer of slave labor, he says goodbye to his factory workers, puts his family in the car, and goes to embrace Ben Kingsley, who played the role of the factory manager. And he breaks down and he cries. He weeps, he was inconsolable. And he felt as though his contributions were insignificant, that he could have done so much more. But yet when you look at what he did, obviously he had an amazing, significant impact. The world of sports and entertainment offers countless examples, right? How about A-Rod? Look, this kid is a stud. He came out of high school and went straight to the minor leagues of the Seattle Mariners. Bounced his way between the minors and the majors, eventually landed in a position as the starting shortstop at the ripe old age of 20 for the Seattle Mariners. He had an amazing first year. Numbers were off the charts. Placed second in the MVP voting that year. His numbers dwindled in the second year, and it began fueling some speculation like, how come his third-year numbers were so good? He had this tremendous bounce back, and they were thinking maybe it wasn't just because of his commitment and dedication and hard work, that maybe there was something else that was amiss. And in 2001, he signed a 10-year, $252 million contract, which was the most lucrative of all time, to play baseball. You know, hit a ball with a stick. It's like, it was in that moment that he, quote, began to feel as though he wasn't worthy of that recognition. That he began to feel enormous pressure to perform at the highest level and to meet the expectations of his critics. And so what did he do? Well, he turned to HGH and steroids and everything else, and he's now been banned from baseball. And, you know, he had the raw talent. He had everything that he needed to be significant enough, but yet he felt as though his contributions still were insignificant. Or how about Joan, right? I mean, come on, Joan. I mean, it's like, it's so many plastic surgeries, you kind of now look like an alien. I mean, it's like, congratulations, I think. But, you know, don't get me wrong, I love Joan. I mean, I think she's one of the funniest comedians of all time. But over the years, she's kind of taken on this role of like this harsh, kind of mean, over-the-top critic. But you know who she's the biggest critic of? That's right, herself. I mean, because how else could she do this to the outside of her body unless she didn't feel beautiful on the inside? And she felt as though she would lack societal significance unless she tried to appear decades younger than she actually is. So how do we attain significance? Well, perhaps it's when we stop looking at these arbitrary milestones, that, you know, these lines in the sand that we draw where we say, you know, if I do this, then I can do that kind of thing. You know, I do a lot of speaking to students and to the unemployed because I'm just really fired up to help people, especially those in transition, to find their way. And I do a little exercise with them that I want to share with you now to kind of, you know, illuminate what I'm talking about. So what I do is I draw a line in the middle of a black, you know, whiteboard, whatever. And I ask them, you know, hey, you're unemployed. Give me some adjectives that describe your emotions, right? How are you feeling right now? So how do you think, just shout them out. So like, how do you think some of the folks who are unemployed are feeling? Powerless. Okay, what else? Pressure. What was that? Bored, angry, etc. Okay. And then I ask them, you know, after you land the job, right? What happens? So powerless becomes what? Powerful. Pressure becomes relief. Bored becomes challenged, right? Whatever it might be, right? Busy. And angry becomes happy. And so I say to them, you know, look, if you go into a job interview with the left side of the board, you know, how do you think that job interview is going to go? You know, you walk in feeling powerless and pressure and bored and angry. You know, unless they're the guy who's like, yeah, you know, I got your resume. Oh, and the fact that you're powerless, you know, feeling a lot of pressure, you're bored and you're angry, I mean, that's just a bonus, man. You know, can you start tomorrow? Right? I mean, that's just not realistic. But if you go into the interview, you know, feeling powerful with a sense of relief and taking on the challenges and feeling happy, you know, how do you think that job interview is going to go? And of course, the inevitable answer is much better. And so then I say, you know what? What does it cost you? I mean, really, what does it cost you to cross over that line now and live your life on the right side of the board? And the answer is nothing. But what does it cost you to live your life on the left side of the board? The answer, of course, is everything. So it's a choice. Now, after my stepfather's passing, I began to try to figure out how I could impact not only those who share this lifetime with me, but also those of lifetimes to come. And so I started writing and speaking and teaching in the hope of potentially my experiences and shortcuts and tools and resources could possibly help others. And I also began to embrace the fact that all of us in this moment are significant. And I created a couple of guiding principles to help keep you really on path because, you know, life is tricky, man. It's like, we're consistently bombarded with the whims and agendas of others, right? And social media doesn't make anything any better. I mean, that's the reality. Facebook, Vine, all that stuff. It's like you get a sort of a behind the curtains look at like the house you could be living in, right? The car you could be driving, the body you could have, the sex you're obviously not having. It's like thanks Zuckerberg, right? I hope you can buy a conscience with all that money. But, so it's like, so I created a couple of these guiding principles, and one is accept. And the key here is really to accept yourself, right here, right now, and embrace the fact that you are significant in this very moment. And yes, you've been dealt a hand of cards, but it's not a matter of the cards you've been dealt. It's a matter of how you play your hand. And in that process, you have to become a creator. There's no choice here. Because look, you can be a critic or you can be a creator. And I got to tell you, it is super easy to be a critic. And it is super hard to be a creator. I mean, you're being a critic right now. Why does he have his sleeves rolled up? Why isn't he wearing brown shoes with a brown belt? Why did they choose red as the background? I mean, I get that, right? It's just the way it is. And so when is the last time you put something forth for the world to judge? Not because you had to, but because you wanted to. And for a lot of us, the answer is a long time ago. I mean, perhaps maybe like even when you were 3 and you built like this crazy castle out of Play-Doh and you were playing with your little buddy and you showed it to him and you were like, hey, check this out. And your buddy was like, meh. It's like, what? Creativity just cut right from the, right there by a 3-year-old who still craps his pants. It's like, come on, man. Really? Never again do you put yourself out on a limb. And when you create, be polarizing, right? I mean, stop trying to impress people you don't really like anyway. It's like, when you think about it, people are going to line up on either side of you. They're going to line up on the left, they're going to line up on the right, but there is no life in the middle. There is no life in the middle. I don't care what you do, you just got to make sure that they damn well knew you were here. And in the words of Dr. Seuss, be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. So the second principle is all about allow. And you have to allow your brilliance to come through. Your DNA is wired to excel in very specific ways. And so it's your job, it's your goal to identify your gifts and recognize that those gifts represent the solution to someone else's problem. So in the words of one of my clients, Andrea Robinson, she said, it took me almost 60 years to realize that I am the solution to someone else's problem. As you sit here today, you are the solution to someone else's problem. And by not sharing of yourself, you're not only doing a huge disservice to yourself, of course, but to those who are waiting for you. And once you figure out what your gifts are, and it's a matter of what I call your what, right? So it's a matter of discovering your what, which is the one amazing thing you were really born to do. And your what is comprised of 3 elements. So it's your gifts. It's really what's in your inherent blueprint. It's in your DNA. It's then the vehicle that you will use to share those gifts with the world. And then the people that you're most compelled to serve. Now, most people will go through their entire lifetime without even answering one of these parts of the equation. So, you're certainly not alone if you're unclear. Almost no one identifies all 3. And, of course, this is applicable for, corporations as well. But once you discover what your what is, that's when the magic truly happens. And just embrace the fact and accept the fact that your what has chosen you. It is not that which you have chosen. And as you begin to share your what with the world, you'll recognize that life is not about you. That the magic happens. The magic happens when you get out of this sense of self and you do everything that you possibly can to improve the lives of others. I know my books are on the self-help shelves, I get that, but it's like, it's not about self. Self-help, it's a misnomer. Get out, do your thing, help the world, and everything else will fall into place. So embrace your greatness. Embrace your greatness, because ultimately, that's when everything comes to fruition. And the beautiful thing about life is that life starts over when? Right now. And life starts over again when? Right now. Right now. And so what I ask you to think about is, you are, as you sit here today, one choice away from being significant, from understanding that there is so much that you have to give and that you can impact literally millions of lives. And to illustrate the power of choice, let me share an example with you real quick. Let's just say that somebody wants to have sex with you, okay? And if you're, but you don't have a condom, okay? So someone wants to have sex with you, but you don't have a condom. And, if you're a stud like me, you'd be like, well, heck yeah, and then proceed to give her, the best 2 minutes of her life. or if we're among friends here, right? So maybe 90 seconds, okay, but that's a different story. So don't ask my wife. But, the reality is that if you go through with that, then, heck, 9 months later you could end up with one of these, right? or even worse, 2 of these. And so it's just, God, it's so funny because life absolutely does start over right now, and what you choose to do will impact how your life resonates with not only those who share this lifetime with you, but those of lifetimes to come. In closing, I'd like to share this quote from Chuck Palahniuk, and he said, "We all die. The goal isn't to live forever. The goal is to create something that will." And the good news is, you're still alive, right? You can create the legacy that you want to leave starting right now. You are one choice away, as you sit here today, from accepting yourself, accepting your brilliance, or deciding you suck, right? You are one choice away from allowing your greatness to come through and share that gift with the world, or deny yourself and others the gifts of who you truly are. As I look back on my funeral and the vision that I had, I now know and hope what I will hear the person giving my eulogy. I think I'm pretty clear on what I want them to say. And what I want them to say is, here lies Steve Olsher. He was a loving husband to Lena, caring, compassionate father to Isaiah, Bobby, and Xavier, a deeply loyal friend, and polarizing creator whose contributions helped the lives of millions create a life of purpose, fulfillment, and contribution. But above all else, he was significant, and so are you. Thank you very much.